Well, they've had to learn and adapt to a lot of things. Um, I think it started off with there's just the sudden nature. If everybody seems to remember March 13th, it was sort of the Friday that the felt like the world shut down. And I think very quickly families went into a mode of protection. And we can do this, and we're going to get lots of food and lots of supplies, and we're going to be okay. And they quickly had to learn how to figure out, first of all, remote learning, a lot of technology. And I think it quickly revealed the disparities in our, let's just say our state, but certainly our country and the world. Who had Wi Fi? Who had home computers? Who had even space? When the recommendation is, well, for you parents, find a workspace that's quiet and that you can be focused in. Oh, and by the way, your kids all need their own private workspace as well. It also discovered those, disparities in figuring that piece out. And I think that, those were the biggest challenges were space, technology, figuring it out, and keeping your kids on track. So while parents were trying to work, they also had to make sure their kids got to the right Zoom room, that they weren't, also on their phone or paying attention, or was their camera on, and were they even learning? I think there are some kids too that just this isn't a good format for them. They're not engaged. They're not comfortable on a video. They're not going to raise their hand and ask any questions. So I know lots of kids that just sort of skipped out or slept through things, turned their camera off. And so I think parents had to deal with that. And one of the biggest tolls I think that we'll look back on 2020 is really the toll that this pandemic actually has had on the working mother. There's been a lot around the working mother. She was the de facto plan. If, schools were going to be shut down, she was going to be the one that was going to be home, that was going to give up her career, or was going to be the one to reduce to part time or try to get some flexibility. And we see, I think it's like a four times fold women leaving the workplace than men during this pandemic. So that's actually had a huge effect on families. As of last week, the stats were still, I think, in sort of the 800,000 women that have had to leave the workforce versus 200,000 men. I don't think so. I think that there's a lot around women being the de facto. I mean, I think one of the things we know about mothers is that mothers try to do it all. So mothers get the degree and they get the job and they birth children and raise children and they just do it all. They add it all onto their plate versus compartmentalizing and saying, okay, now we have a family. You take care of the family and I will go to work and do my thing. That's compartmentalizing. And so for women, especially in a time of pandemic, that natural instinct also very much kicks in. And I'm not saying for every woman it was maybe a terrible decision. It was a decision that for them felt natural. I think everybody's different. So there are a sector of women who had no choice because maybe they were essential workers and that industry was closed down and they didn't even have an opportunity. There's also maybe more educated professionals who could have that flexibility if they were in a relationship in that way. And there were also then a sect of women who, when it came down to it, who was going to be home to make sure the kids were okay, that they naturally felt like it was going to be them. So I think there's a couple of camps of women and what drove us to this place. But certainly in 2021 and years moving forward, we're going to have to figure out how to get those women back into the workforce. Yeah, it's been really interesting effect on kids. We know a very detrimental effect on kids for the most part. We have seen mental health issues skyrocket. Anxiety is very high, depression is very high, suicide attempts are higher than normal for this time of year. It's been crushing to kids' mental health. And the ages that have been hit even the hardest among the hardest are adolescents. And I think one of the things they learned was that while technology did help the days did help them get through. And I'm talking as if this is in the past. This is really still happening. But while technology is still helping them get by, and they are, playing games with other friends sometimes, or just binging on shows and still being able to be educated in some form, they did realize that it does not replace human contact. So if there's somewhat of a silver lining, that's a positive. They know for sure. And a lot of them say to me, even FaceTime, there's only what can we talk about every day? Every day feels the same. There's not that much to really say. So they're not loving technology as a replacement for relationships. So I hope that that is a positive for the future, and that they'll take that forward. But we have a lot of lonely, isolated kids spending a lot of time in their rooms on their devices, not very well engaged, and really not responding that well to remote learning. So it's a huge mental health concern. I think that there are a couple of things that I've been talking about all year, but now that we're coming close to the end of the year, I think still stand true that are really important. One of them is that it's ideal if the parents and the kids are having a parallel process, meaning that the parents are sticking to a routine and therefore they're having their kids stick to a routine. So you do get up, you take a shower, you eat breakfast, you set up your workspace, and again, that varies what that looks like, but that there is some sort of designated workspace, even if it's, 5 feet from somebody else. Your headphones are ready, your laptop is charged. So there's a routine, and it's a new routine. And I think it's really helpful if the whole family's doing that. So that's one thing that's held true. From the very beginning, I said routines are going to be important because I knew that kids thrive off of structure and routine. And that's the very first thing that got taken away was structure and routine and socialization. And so we need to have a sense of that, even if you live in tight quarters, even if, there's not much, you don't have a very big house, it's still really important to do that. So that's one of the biggest things. And parents getting their kids out of their room. And I know it's hard. I know there's some parents that'll watch this and say, my kid just won't. It's dark in there. They're under the covers. They're with an iPad and they don't want to come out and they're irritable. But you have to get them outside. They have to have fresh air. They have to have movement. They have to get that sunlight, engage with somebody. If they don't want to talk too much, fine. But it's really important that, and for parents themselves, that they're getting outside and moving, and that they're really just requiring it of their kids, even if that's just 20, 30 minutes a day. I mean, I think about my own family in the very beginning in March, April. We all went on family walks together, and there would be so many people that sometimes we actually felt like we had to find an off time because the sidewalks were literally crowded with other families. And, it was sort of nice. Like you could look out your window and there were a lot of people out and about and walking, and it was great. But it was novel, and this is no longer novel. And so there is fatigue. I mean, COVID fatigue. I forgot when I got asked that question first, but it's been a couple months already. It wasn't very long until people felt, I think it was summer, until people just were like, okay, I'm tired of this and I'm over this. And I think we went from COVID fatigue. Now, of course, we still have COVID fatigue. I also think that we have decision fatigue. It's not, it's first of all, parents, the stress they have been under with the level of decisions they've had to make. Do you keep your kid home all year? Do you send them to remote? Do they get to play with the neighbor? Do they need to wear a mask? These are decisions still today, every day, you're faced with. Oh, well, our neighbors aren't really wearing masks. Is it awkward if we ask them to? It's just, it doesn't end. And of course, with the holidays now, it's really putting people in a decision points that they're just not comfortable with. And a lot of people are making very different decisions. We see airports are very crowded. So there are people who are just going to go ahead and go visit families. And there's other families who are just staying home with their nuclear family. So the idea of like, hey guys, let's go outside and, for our family, let's play basketball. We played Foursquare. We did a lot of things, but after a while it did get tiring. And so I think with the winter months coming, maybe with some time off, parents can sort of get that revised energy again because it's a new season. Like today would be a great day. Let's go play in the snow. But I think that to ask parents to keep this up, it's like a level of energy for a year, is really a lot to ask of them. And so it's also a good idea to put it onto the kids, let them get creative, because kids are inherently creative and have a lot more energy than most adults. Yeah, I think that that's very true. Along with making a lot of decisions, we've also had to say no a lot. And I think that I will tell you my general experience, which is with a lot of kids, we've been as busy as ever, is kids have handled this remarkably well. Even for the kids who I'm saying are struggling, I still think their resilience and their flexibility and their ability to just go ahead, put on a mask and go, or hand sanitize all the time, or hand wash every time for 20 seconds. I have been really impressed. But in terms of saying no, it's just really, I think, a key for parents when they feel so terrible about saying no is just to say, we're in really unusual times right now. It's not going to be forever. And I've heard a lot of people this week saying, next year, we're going to have 2 Thanksgivings. Whatever you need to say, next year, we're going to have the world's biggest birthday party for you. Or next year, as soon as we're all clear, we can have a big old sleepover party. I think just keeping them focused on the future, because I do feel like the light at the end of the tunnel is starting to become visible. The tunnel is still maybe long, meaning several months long, but the light is there. And I think we couldn't even say that a month ago. We really, a month ago, were unsure of. We thought maybe the light was going to be there, but we really couldn't say that with as much certainty as we can today. So I think that it's important to say that. I also think it's important to emphasize to kids, maybe a little bit older, that this is a really good example of truly how connected we are. We are much more connected as human beings, as evidenced by this pandemic, than we could ever have just taught our kids out of a textbook or just verbally told them. They know it now. They feel it now. When somebody tests positive for COVID in a class, sometimes I'll still hear kids say, but how? But how did that happen? Or where? And it's like, we're all connected, obviously, from somewhere, right? And so just it really has hit home for them. Yeah, we really are all very connected. I think number one is a vast appreciation for in-person schooling, their teachers, their friends at school, the routine and structure that schools provided, because it's the biggest thing that's been taken away. I had my kids say last night they went to the grocery excuse me. Last night my kids went to the grocery store and they said it was so crowded. How can the grocery store be so crowded but their schools are closed? And, in some ways, I think the older kids are getting very weird mixed messages about what is the importance of school versus other things. So I think first and foremost, they will take an appreciation for their teachers and schooling. That's first and foremost. I think the second thing that they will take away is family. I mean, as much as it has been draining and daunting at times to be sort of, I told the kids, you're safe at home, not stuck at home. But in order to be safe at home, I know that all the kids that I work with, I've said that to, and my own family, I've said it to. At least we have each other. There are millions of people truly sitting in a small apartment that don't have families to get tired of, to get bored with, a sibling to fight with, and a sibling to also watch movies with, and cuddle with, and that they're safe and you don't have to wear a mask around them. And so I think that the two things that ultimately will come out is a appreciation for family and appreciation for teachers, school, and socialization. Parents can learn how much their kids really need them and their leadership. I think that the pandemic has revealed, first of all, how fragile childhood is, and how, they've been watching their kids, some of them sink into a depression, go into isolation. Uh, and so I think it has been an opportunity, at least for some families that have shared with me, to get to know their kid a little bit more and say, I see why maybe they were feeling that way in the summer. And when we did this, this, and this, that made a huge difference for them. And so in some ways, I think that right now we're still in it. So there's not as much of that epiphany or that ability to take a step back. Like a lot of people still don't have a breather. So they're not taking steps back to see. But I do think that sometime in a year and a half, parents will look back and have learned what their children like more. They'll have known them to deeper levels. They will have appreciated their talents or their humor or their resilience in ways that they wouldn't have before. I just think right now we're still in it, so that isn't happening yet, but I think that really is to come. Oh, I think kids have taught their parents for them to appreciate teachers and schooling and to understand the profound institution of education. Honestly, it's just what I keep coming back to because that's the number one thing kids got taken away from them. And if you're like the hundreds of thousands of kids in particularly in the public schools, but also some private schools, they don't have school. And and I think that the adults have really, really come to appreciate the multiple levels of what getting up, having that structure, going somewhere for 7, 8 or 9 hours, if you're involved in sports or activities, what that really does to help shape a child and the enormous role that that plays in a child's life. So I do feel like that's something that they have really, really learned. Right now, there's a mixture of feelings if the school's in or out, and there's still some tensions. Like we're still so in it. But I very much know, just given everybody's response to the lack of schooling or the differences in schooling, that they will look back and have a really great appreciation for what it means to their child, not just their education and their academics, but their whole child, what it means to have that institution there. I don't think people will take that for granted ever again. I guess, one of the things that I would advise people, and I have already started to, and I've already started doing myself, is I think it's really important. I always wind up saying this, but to journal or write about this time, keep a diary of this time. It's so historic. And already, even if I asked you, well, how did you feel in April and May? Your memory will already start being a little bit skewed. You won't really remember. Was it okay? Were you okay? It's like our memories are quite selective. So I think it's a great idea to encourage your kids to do that. Maybe it's a family memory book. Still take pictures because there's not as much to take pictures of right now. When you're going to birthday parties and you're going to fall harvest and pumpkin picking, you have lots of really sweet pictures of your kids. So I just want to encourage parents to still take pictures of them, um, do videos of them, capture their voices, capture their words, their thoughts, their feelings, create a memory book, maybe even print it off and, give it to somebody as a gift so that it's a reminder that you did have each other. There's humor to find where you can. There are special moments that happened and that you can still capture it. This doesn't have to be a black hole of a year where, oh my gosh, there were no birthday parties and there were no pictures and there were no great memories. That's not how we want to leave this. We want to be resilient. I'm really convinced that this generation will come out of this grittier, more resilient, more creative than ever. And so that could be one of the silver linings, I think, if we continue to shape this in the right way going forward. It has taught me patience. Um, I had a lot of different plans for 2020. And I mean, truly, there's, a memorial of life that we didn't get to do as a family as a result of COVID. There were near and dear family friends of mine that I haven't seen since not this summer, but the summer before, that's, normally how we get to spend our summers. And I'll allow myself little moments. I contain them. I give myself a limited amount of time to be sad and have a pity party or be angry, whatever it is I feel. I had just different plans, different professional plans, different personal plans. However, I just focus on patience. I'm not focusing on like, necessarily like optimism and that 2020 is going to be the reverse year. I think a lot of people are hoping for that. I don't think that, if this is black, 2021 is white. I don't think it's the exact opposite probably, but patience. I just keep practicing patience, that I have to be patient with the process. I have to trust in the process. I can only control what I can. So that's hard for somebody who's got a lot of dreams and a lot of plans and things that I wanted to do. To just really settle into a slower pace and patience has definitely been my lesson. And I'm sure will continue to be my lesson in 2021. I would say this is just, I mean, for a slight angle of humor, I think that many parents learned, they learned what Zoom was for the first time. They learned, oh, wait, the camera's on, mute, audio on, oh, everybody can see us. I think there's been a lot of probably funny Zoom moments, maybe some embarrassing ones. And so for kids, it's because I think for the first time they felt like, oh, my parents are finally up to speed to my generation and the way that we function and learn. And they get a real kick out of their parents struggling with that, or their parents calling their kids their IT department. So in some ways, I think that it's been funny for kids. It's been bonding and humbling for many parents. And I think it's something we will all always remember in 2020, that we discovered what Zoom was and sort of how to live life on video.